Welcome to the Talk to People podcast. And today we're coming remote. I have some business out of town and I get to see some cousins and just having a great time. But what being out of town does a lot of times is just reinforce how much you love your hometown. And boy, I love being around our town and I love meeting and talking to people. And I noticed somebody who I've watched since high school, really kind of grow up, somebody who's a dear, dear friend of our family and I love very much, going through some things in our community, which many of us strive actually to go through. And I want to bring on to the Talk to People podcast today, Alina Groth. Alina, first of all, thank you for being with us. And I look forward to having a conversation with you.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. So I'm super excited to get to share today and hopefully just be able to connect. And I love that you do this and we get to hear from people in our community. So it's so powerful.
Well, and first and foremost, I have to give a big shout out to Chris Groth. Of course, he was the artist on our rubble building that put the beautiful shine there for us. What a talented and wonderful husband you have, Alina.
Absolutely do. He's every day there's something new. He's a goofy guy, but also just so incredibly talented at most anything that he puts his mind to. So I'm grateful to have. I'm a pretty creative person. I have a lot of great thoughts and ideas, but sometimes getting them out there would be a nightmare. And so that's such a wonderful piece for my puzzle, is having a partner that we can go back and forth on what's in my brain, and then he can bring it into this 3D world. And I think that's so fun.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that, because I believe relationship, in fact, the most intimate relationship, husband and wife relationship, is such a beautiful thing. And Chris grew up in our community. You guys came together. Tell us a little bit of the story about Alina and Chris.
Oh, well, we've been together for a little over 10 years now. Incredibly grateful for the journey it's been. We actually went to high school together, but didn't really know each other. It was just like, oh, we existed in the same world for a little bit. And then we re-met whenever I opened my first business. He came in as a customer looking to get in shape, and ended up after that meeting, we met at the same gym. And I was like, whoa, are you following me?
What are you I love that. What are you following me? And I'll tell you, Alina, Chris has gotten into great shape too.
Yes, he most definitely has. But basically, he was like, no, I came to the meeting with you, so I missed my normal gym time. And so from then on, we actually started going to the same gym class at the same time. It took us about 3 months to hang out outside of going to the gym. And then once we did, we've been inseparable ever since. We've built a beautiful life together, have 2 beautiful babies, and it's just been an incredible journey.
Well, talking about a beautiful life, that's something that actually endears me to you, Alina, in the sense of how you guys from a young couple have worked together to really build that beautiful life. Let's go back a little bit in your life, if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about your history in Shawnee. And early on, I believe that we met, me as a little bus driver, and you hop on the bus and we go to church and with a bunch of kids. That's really our beginning. Talk about life early for Alina.
So earlier on, kind of getting started, I was born into chaos, just living with a single mother who lived with her parents, who also just lived a crazy, chaotic, drug-filled life. I have 2 siblings that are by birth, and one of them ended up passing away. He was murdered, and that actually kind of launched us into Oklahoma. So when I was 10 years old, I moved to Oklahoma with my sister, my mom, and my stepdad, who both were drug addicts from the beginning. When I was 7 years old, I found a crack pipe in their room. At the time, I had no idea what it was. got in trouble for it and was like, okay, mind your business, right? And then growing up, you start to realize things are different, you know, but through those years going into high school, my mom's addiction just overcame her, and she just got so heavily involved in it. She was no longer really in reality. And my stepdad was an alcoholic. So he also was not able to be that stable, steady environment as well, which led me into the summer after my freshman year. I was actually homeless for a little bit. I went into a program that no longer exists, sadly, here, but it was called at the time Shawnee Interfaith Hospitality Network. A lot to say.
Yeah.
And then I think it turned into like the Faith Network or something like that. And along that, right before we entered into that, it's so funny, and I wanted to share this piece because I think it's so important. Right over, I'm at the Healthy Hive right now, and right across is the doggy spot on the other corner, and they have that little alleyway. Well, back in the day, this was like 15 years ago now, well, longer, but almost 20 years ago, there used to be an actual bench there in that little spot.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I actually stayed a night on that bench waiting to get into the program. And for me, and I'm going to be emotional, but that is a big part of also like being on Main Street, and why it's so impactful to me is because I get to be outside. I have a window. We have a window in the Hive, if you haven't been in, that kind of looks directly at that little nook. And I know the bench isn't there anymore, but for me, when I come in, it's just such a reminder of where you've been to where you can be, to turn and stand in a place that was created and come from that. And so it's just a beautiful thing. So that was a little bit of my life and childhood growing up, getting into the teen world, and facing homelessness at that level. And thankfully I didn't have to be out there too long. Was able to connect and meet another family, a wonderful family, and kind of just take another direction in life from there. Learned a lot. It was like two different scales of living to go from drug addict parents to very just like a totally different world. It was really hard at the time to kind of explain, like just flipping into like a totally different life. Incredibly grateful for all of it. You know, there's so many lessons to unpack that unfortunately this call is just not going to allow, but there's just so much looking back now that I got to learn in each of these chunks of life along the way, and it just kind of built one thing into the next, just continuing to put a foot forward, a foot forward, a foot forward.
Well, in talking about a foot forward, the Healthy Hive there, you've created a wonderful spot for so many people. And let's back up, because something that you said was Chris walked into your first business. And as I recall, that's kind of similar to the business that you're in, but different. And let's talk about that, Alina. So you come from really a very hard spot. And that hard spot, though, motivated you somehow to be able to get to where you are today. And we're going to build the story to where you are today. What was that moment in which Alina decided, or Alina started to move forward into her own identity and into her own life in creating the business?
I actually think that started for me in later years in high school, and it wasn't quite the business yet. I hadn't grown to that, but that idea of choosing different started for me probably around my junior year, I would say. And I was very passionate, and still am, about pole vaulting and running, because I ran for Shawnee and pole vaulted for them. And so that really was a huge outlet for me, for my home life. Like that was like a second family for me on the team, and growing up and being able to be active. And I just loved pole vaulting so much. To me, my mindset was, if I don't want to live this way, track and running or pole vaulting is my ticket out of here. This is what's going to get me into college, at least, because I knew I wouldn't be able to just pay for it. So I was like, for me, that's going to be the avenue. So that was like kind of my like, okay, I want different. I don't want to live this way. That was my ticket, which then led me into, I got into athletics on a collegiate level, and I still love the sport, but it became more of a career or a job for me.
Yeah.
And it became overwhelming trying to be a full-time student, trying to make enough money to make everything work, and just not having the discipline due to not being taught that early on. I just lacked that discipline to stay committed in that way. When I was in high school, I ended up getting my CNA license. So I was already doing some work with that from 16 on through college. And by the time I got in college in the nursing program, I just found myself very like, why am I doing this? I don't even love this anymore. Like I'm not finding that passion anymore for it. So that's what kind of led me into that looking for something else avenue. And that's when I found this business, partnered with the company Herbalife. That's where I got started, and decided within a couple of months of joining, like, hey, you know what? I am 21 years old. If this is for whatever reason not going to work out, I will just reapply for the nursing program. I've already got all my associates, like we're ready to go if I need to, but I'm going to give this a shot, because if I'm already burnt out here, how am I going to move forward if I'm already just burnt out, So kind of talking about taking that leap of moving into something new. Yes, moving into something new that you're not really sure how it's going to turn out, but that it's more in alignment with the things that you want in life and the life that you want to create. And so that's what called me into stepping into this new business. Within a couple of months, we opened our first location, which used to be called Nonstop Nutrition, back over on Harrison Street. And I always say we had that for about 2 years. And I learned in the first 2 years how not to run a business. So that was my little learning baby.
Yes. Well, and let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, the interfaith hospitality group, or what it was called, and then also in pole vaulting, you had coaches. And I've never talked to you about this, but one of my favorite people, Scott Wilkinson, of course, one of the greatest pole vaulting coaches ever. Did coaching and did Scott create an environment kind of like the interfaith that gave you like, oh, I can do better, or oh, I do have hope for a future? Was it those kind of stepping stones from people around you who actually maybe gave you empowerment to believe in yourself and give you hope for a future?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, on some levels there was like, now looking back, I'm like, that dude's crazy. We all have a little crazy in us, and I love Wilkinson. Like I met him when I was in 5th grade. So he was a huge person, like a mentor to me growing up in those early years. And yeah, there was probably my senior year, whenever he had a transition, and you're at that age and you don't really understand him stepping into head coach. So that meant no more like one-on-one as much, and that was a little tough, but we had some tough conversations. Some days we would leave the mat and I'd be like, I'm never talking to that man again. But, he was a big part of me getting through those earlier years as well, like middle school. At the time, we would have like a small couple of day window to like be able to jump with the high school kids. Mm-hmm. And I was so hungry. I would just hang out. Even after our practice was over, I would just wait until they were like putting everything away and like locking the door. I was just there. And I still remember to this day, he had told me, he was like, I didn't pick you for pole vaulting because you were necessarily so athletic, because in the beginning, I was not built for that. I was more like going the mid-distance route early on. And he was like, I picked you because you have so much heart. And we can work with that. And so that was something that's always stuck with me from him as well, but definitely so.
Yeah, and you, with that heart, I mean, I think you were a part of the only one that I've ever seen. Our school got first, second, and third, and got all the points at the state tournament, which then turned into very close. We probably ended up runner-up that year or something because of you guys.
Yep, we still actually hold that record as 5A, like 1, 2, 3 sweep. So
yeah. It was beautiful to watch. I need to find that video. But now we move forward, and so you start in the first success as a business, because when you can figure out that how not to do something, that's still a success. But you described something that I think that everybody has trouble with, especially going into business for themselves or starting something new. As you talked about the transition from really becoming student to becoming a life member, in the sense of you're going to step off this cliff and you're going to go for it. Talk about that a little bit, Alina, if you would, when you started that first business and you left, or when you had to shut down the first business and move to the next business, whatever you feel is apropos, to talk about the challenge that it is for someone to say, okay, I've learned everything that I can learn right here. It's time for me to start a new chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, that lesson comes in from after the second, when I closed the business down. And that was my first time feeling like a failure on like such a large scale. So for a little bit, it was more like looking at that failure like, wow, I suck, and attaching all these things to me and who I was as a person. So I went into a little bit of like a hidey hole, if you will. And then kind of moved out of that, of like realizing now, like the looking back of like, it wasn't a failure. And now that's why I can so lightheartedly say, like, I learned everything not to do. Like, what a powerful thing, right?
Yes.
To get to move into knowing, okay, so that system wasn't it. That doesn't mean I suck. It just means that system wasn't working. So we try a different system. And that was a big decision whenever I had stepped back. That was also around the time that Chris and I found out we were expecting my firstborn, little Brixton. So there was lots of things going on, lots of change, lots of movement, lots going on between Chris and I, lots going on between like, what do I do now? I'm becoming a mother. How do I maintain a business and be a new mom when that terrifies me, and all of these things, right?
Yeah, and the emotions. I mean, we forget that we're emotional creatures, and all of the chemicals in your body just going off because, oh no, now I'm with child, and just how everything changes physically and naturally within us, and how that that can really be overwhelming just in itself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, Chris was such a rock through that. And it was like a big moment for me of like, you really are my life partner, not just because we're having a child together, because we actually had a conversation about that. Like, I want to be your life partner because we are partners together, not because we're producing a child together, right?
Yes.
And so we had those tough conversations. We had those few months. It was tough where we were trying to figure out this new life and how we were going to build it, which led him to step into the oil field. So he stepped into that, meaning he was gone 12 days and home for 2.
Wow.
Pretty much through my entire pregnancy. And then when I had Brixton, and I think Brixton was about 3 months old, was whenever this decision came up. And it was like he was about 3 months old. Chris come home from work, and I handed him over, went to the kitchen to get some drinks for us, brought him back, and was literally just filling up water cups. Came back. He was on the couch holding Brixton, asleep like this, because he was so exhausted. And to me, my mind it was kind of a heartbreaking moment for me, because I'm like, he's going to grow up not knowing his dad, not because he doesn't want to be here, but because he's trying to produce life in a way that doesn't fit for us. I know that for some people that's a beautiful thing, but for us it was not working.
Sure.
And then it was like light bulb, like, girl, you learned all the things not to do. Let's put into practice what to do. And that's when I stepped into taking over ownership of Pure Nutrition here on MacArthur Street. If you haven't been by, shout out to them. But so getting into that location, and that was a great, like, for me, that was a really great curve into when I stepped into it. It was doing maybe like 10 consumptions a day, we had a little bit of rebranding to do. So we got to learn all of those. I got to learn so many skills on team building and working with different people and different emotions and different ways of personalities, like all those things. That's where I got to hatch and learn all those things with Pure and build some amazing friends and within the community and network to see like, how can we all work together to create these healthy, happy, positive experiences on a fitness level, a nutrition level, but also a spiritual level. And so the Hive has kind of come into like that level for me, like that spiritual community networking side. So
okay, but I want to go back to Chris asleep, the baby asleep with his dad. You walking in and you seeing the beauty of that moment. That's a huge transition. That's a huge transition because this is your bread and butter. He's doing this because he knows as a man he needs to provide for his wife and for his family. And you guys, I'm taking it, had to have that conversation of, hey, look, something else is more important, and that is us. That's our relationship. That's the relationship that you have with our child. This is how we can, I guess, ultimately, correct me, Alina, but you were saying this is how we can grow stronger. It's not about you making more money. It's about you being with us and allowing the Spirit of God to move through us in whatever direction it is. And you just felt it from your heart. It wasn't like you had it all figured out.
Correct. Yeah. It was just a moment of seeing that and deciding that wasn't the priority. And so we need to put a plan together to move in the direction of what is our priority. Mm-hmm. And that is having present parents. And that's the life we wanted. So,
that's where I want to be, because I believe that's where it starts, is that you made the decision that was against really everything that seems to be out there, because what's out there is happiness comes with you being this or you being that and you going forward and you doing this and you making all of this and you doing all of that. Whereas really the peace to you came, and if you can expand on this, the peace to you came just seeing your family in front of you and saying, hey, this is my priority, not the stuff that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the things and stuff are nice, and there's nothing wrong with going for those things. But for me, it just became an awareness of, it was almost kind of like a little bit of like a rubber band effect, honestly. It was like the awareness of, okay, I want presence. I want both of us to be present. So it was a huge motivator for me to get back into my business and working and doing those things, because my business allowed more flexibility than what his line of work did. So it was like, okay, there's that awareness. But then I also kind of like sucked back into this like work grind mindset that can also be very unhealthy. And for a little while, it did get a little unhealthy. So just knowing that like your road sometimes is going to be to get to where you want, sometimes it's not just a straight shot all the time to your next point. And so it felt like, oh, this great awareness, we have this plan, we're going to move forward and do these things. And we started down that road and we were doing those things. And then I got super locked in and just became so addicted to like the grind mindset, neither good or bad, just realizing, hey, that's no longer serving you. Hey, it's pulled you off your course of your purpose of presence with your own kid and your husband. And so it was that, oh, okay, let's refocus here and get back on track and move into those things. So
did Chris come home and come away from his job, and he kind of became present there?
Yes. So after that conversation, it had been a year and a half, and he was able to retire from Tinker. So he had moved from that conversation. He went to Tinker to where he would at least have a little bit more availability. Mm-hmm. So again, these stepping stones, it doesn't have to be black or white. That was something that I really had to undo for myself as an adult, is learning the gray area, because the gray is life. Nothing is black or white all the time, right? And Agreed. So it was just this, okay, what can we do to get there? Even though we know like you can't just quit your job cold turkey and do X, Y, Z, right? So how do we work towards getting there, creating those steps to, let's take this job, It's going to give us a little more time availability, and I'll get started working on this, and we'll roll into it from there. So he was able to retire after 1.5 years of us making that plan, and has been a stay-at-home dad who does his artwork on the side. And we both just co-create our lives together in parenting our kids, taking care of the house, or doing our projects, like whatever it is, where we're needed, we show up. And we really try to utilize, instead of a stereotypical, like, I should be home making soup and doing all those things. It's not in alignment for me to be doing that, and it is for him. Let him do those things. If that brings more joy and creativity for him to be home in this season of life, that's where he'll be.
Yeah.
And same for me. And so it's like, sometimes he's like really, and I'm so grateful that he has that mindset of co-creativity instead of like more rigid thinking on that, and just being like, hey, yeah, I'm doing this week, and then, you know, maybe next week I've got this project, so can you handle these things? Right. And just really playing up to like, what are his strengths are. He's really good with structure stuff, like a schedule and staying to a schedule and all those things. So that works perfectly with Piper's little routine and her schedule, because she's new and two and needs more of that structure. And my brain is a little more like flighty on things. So it's like, okay, well, you stick with that and I'll fill in, and you do that well. Let's do that well. And I'll do these things well.
Well, you've always been someone who's been very thoughtful. And from a CEO standpoint, which I would classify you as a business owner, you own your own business. Talk a little bit about that now, is that you transitioned now into the business world in a new way, because now you had the weight of your family with you, and you had to be able to, okay, build something that sustains. What have you learned now that you feel you could share with other people who might right now be struggling? Maybe their household is kind of chaotic, or maybe they're early in their marriage, or there are so many things you have touched on that people can relate to. What would you say to people now about financial providing for a family, especially a young family and a young marriage, and how it all works out to a successful business?
I think the biggest point I could make on that is being aware of what your habits and routines are looking like. For me personally, I believe that a lot of our belief systems, like our however we're functioning in our world of spirituality, of money, fitness, of your body's fitness, the nutrition, the exercise of it, I feel like a lot of those go hand in hand with each other. So when we are not doing the things we know we need to do, it can kind of start to domino or snowball into like, oh, okay, I started by not taking care of my body and by not feeding myself well. And now that I'm not feeding myself well, I'm probably going to eat out more. And then I'm going to just live more of a lifestyle that is not in alignment with your goals. And I think the biggest thing is coming back to you and your partner, if you have one, that is on the same page of where the ship is going. So the biggest thing that we've implemented to really help us is having a monthly meeting that is kind of like a business meeting. It's like, hey, where are our finances? Are they on track with our goals? These kinds of things, like what can we do differently? Where are we proud of ourselves for doing great in? Like all of those things, but being aware of what is that looking like for us? And how are we still moving forward with our goals with that? So just like you have goals with anything else, you've got to have those financial goals. And for us, when we very, very first, kind of taking it back to very first, like knowing nothing about finances, knowing nothing about saving or budgeting or anything like that, the cash flow method was the biggest thing for us, is intentionally writing out a $0 budget, taking that cash and putting it in envelopes so that we were very diligent with our cash and knowing, oh, the envelope's done. That's it. There's no more spending in that. that's it, and budget accordingly. So those little things, and now there's so much content out there that's free on how to do those things. If you just literally Googled or Instagram $0 budget, you can watch a 1-minute video that tells you exactly how to do it. So I love that content and information is out there as well. So from the beginning, getting started in those little ways, that's creating that discipline for you, and then just continuing to have that monthly focus on like, hey, and it could take 15 minutes, like, hey, this is where our budget is, this is where we maybe overspent, let's tighten it back up, or hey, I really want to kind of shift gears and put a little towards this goal instead. And so as long as you're having that intentional, that's where it can continue to build and create that foundation for you to open up into more things later.
Well, and it seems consistent in your journey to success, and I view you, Alina and Chris, as a success, that something that started very early on is goal setting. You put a destination out there that you knew you wanted to achieve or you wanted to accomplish. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the journey now, you have 2 kids. First of all, Mom, tell me about your kids. I want to hear about your kids.
They're beautiful souls. They teach me so much daily. I genuinely believe that our kids are given to us purposefully to teach us, heal us, grow us as parents as well. And my firstborn, Brixton, he is 9, going on 15.
Oh, it'll come.
He loves basketball and soccer right now, are his main sports that he's really into. He's so intelligent, just a really witty, fun guy. He's very matter of fact, I will say. So that's where I get to grow, because he's so like, nope, it's exactly this, or you said exactly this, and so it means exactly this. And so I'm like, okay, you're teaching me a lot about the importance of my words. I hear you. So he's just a bundle of fun and joy, and you just never know what's coming out of that kid's mouth and what direction we're going, and I absolutely love that. And then we've got Piper, little P. She is just turned 2 back in August. She's just such a bright soul, like I don't know, with her, she's teaching me a lot about the woman that I continue to get to grow into, because it's the type of woman that I want to model her growing up to be. And so she's a reader. So I have Brixton, who's my little math, science, like he excels, is always jumping ahead in those categories. And Piper, since she was little, like I have books of her since she could set up on her own. She would just sit with books and look at the pictures. And now anytime it's quiet in the house, typically you're like, oh my gosh, what is my kid getting into? She has found a bed or a couch and has books. And it's just looking at books, reading books, creating her own stories. And she likes to sing a lot. So she's a chatty girl.
Oh, it's always wonderful to think of our kids, and again, setting the goals, but also you've been touching on being teachable, Alina. You have been saying along the journey, you've been willing to listen to yourself, but then also to your children or to a coach, or to people who are helping you off of the street, and you've been listening to learn. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How
Definitely.
important is learning to Alina?
Very. Chris always says, like, you're probably the smartest, he says, you're the smartest person I know. And that's what I tell people, is that you are the smartest person I know. I really like to learn. I just think that any little thing, I'm usually like studying up on something, reading about things, but also just learning from people a lot too.
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons why we want to do this podcast is because I believe, Alina, in your space there, right there on Main and Bell, is one of the easiest places to be able to come in. You can meet there. You have open space there. I'm sure that's why you do it. I know you wanted to allow people to be able to come in and use the space, and in many different ways, let them be able to come up with the ways in which they want to use your space, or get a great drink. I mean, you serve great products there. I love it there at the Healthy Hive. But in saying that, you have been able to come through this journey by setting goals and then failing, but also in failures and in success, being pliable to being taught. And, I feel like my wife is the smartest person that I know. And I'd love to get you two smart people in the room more often so that you guys can be smart and me and Chris can just be in awe of whatever comes out of your mouths. But I learned so much from my wife, and I'm very proud to say that. She's such a wonderful partner for me. What brought me to this moment to say, hey, I need to reach out to Alina, other than my wife showing me the post on Facebook, is that you have now together, you guys have created what and I don't want to misquote you, but you said, really, this is a dream. And I just want my children to be able to realize that dreams can come true. And anyone who, no matter what their background is, they can have success, because you had a picture of your new home, and it's a home in which, we can drive by and see many different types of homes, and we just assume things about other people that may not be true. And from that post, Alina, would you share your heart to say, yeah, we've come through a long journey, and I want my kids, and I would love for everybody to know what your feeling is on how you got there and why it's playing out like it's playing out now.
Yeah, I mean, such a big question to unpack, but I think that it's just more of like, I really wanted to share that because I'm not a very materialistic person. So kind of leading to what you're saying too, like you can look at something and it could be so many different things behind that picture, right? Yes. And but I've also learned that sometimes those images have to be shared because some places that we are along our journey, those are the things that we're going to see that inspire us, And so for me, that's just a tiny piece of something that I've worked really hard for, that outwardly shows the time, the dedication, the skill, the learning to get my family from that transition in life of like where I grew up to where my kids are going to grow up. And for me, it's that I'm waking up in the morning and seeing Piper dance around in the dining room, and Brixton playing football in the yard, and walking on a street that is just filled with birds and beautiful sunsets and all of those. Like that is like me, my heart, and like what is success. And to create that, I get to live in this beautiful house as well. Like that's the cherry on top, right? But it wasn't the foundation. And so I feel like that's important to say. Again, not that it's right or wrong to have those things. It's just that wasn't my like everything, But transitioning into that I'm still waking up. We've been there almost a month, and it's just like I wake up and just immense gratitude, just so much like waking up, like pinch me, is this really my house? And I really did this, and we did this. And, along the way, and that's something I'm still working on in my brain, is like along the way for a long time, it was me and all the things that I got to grow through is how I like to say that. I was intentional with that, because we all have our things. And I think it's just a matter of the quicker, if I could have learned early on, and this is the piece I want to like make for anyone listening who's hung in for this, is that earlier on, I wish I could have learned the word surrender and the meaning of it, and not just, surrender, I know what that means, but like really the embodiment of surrender. And surrendering to when things aren't going the way that I think that they should, or how it is. It's never, one thing one of my mentors taught me was, when you have good, bad, right, and wrong, good, bad, right, and wrong. You just built yourself a box to stay in. And you don't want to live in a box. No one wants to put themselves in a box, right? So there is no, in this concept of what we're talking about, the relatives, is like there's no good, bad, right, wrong. They're just decisions in life. You either are learning lessons or it's moving you forward. And either way, that lesson is moving you forward as well. So when can you surrender to what life is bringing to you, what God, what spirit, whatever universe, whatever your terminology is, can you surrender? The quicker you can surrender to what is being brought to you and move forward, not merely on preference, just because you like or don't like it. It was brought to you for a reason, and that reason is either going to be a lesson or it's because it was something that was to benefit you and move you forward. So I think that whenever you can start taking that mindset on of this isn't happening to me, it's happening for me, and I know I'm going to learn something from this either way, and or it's still putting me closer to my goal. It really just takes the stress off of life and the stress of moving forward. And so the lighter you can get on that end, to me, is success. And so I just think it's so beautiful to kind of have that.
Yes. And now you've touched on another thing that I want to bring up is you're teachable, you have goals, but then Alina, it sounds like you found your inspiration at each of those steps as well. There was something inspiring you at each one of these steps that you took. As a little child, this is not for me. As a pole vaulter, I want to be the best that I can be. As a business owner, I failed, but I learned. In your relationship, it's about us, not about the things. And then you set your goals according to that inspiration. Does that sound right? And does that plug in to what you're saying? Find what is inspiring to you as an individual, and it's not what somebody else tells you. It's what comes from the inside of you.
Absolutely. It's being able to, in our society, unfortunately, we've gotten so heavy on most cases. This is the box that you're supposed to be in, and this is how you're supposed to move through life. And if you don't fit in that box, too bad, suck it up, buttercup. And that, rolling in that box for so long, crushed me. It really started to get tight and uncomfortable, and just it no longer served me when I started to realize I can step outside of this box and have a totally different life if I want to. And it's scary because everyone else around you is not doing that. And so it can be hard to make a decision when it goes against what the norm is. And I just encourage you to, if it was put on your heart, it has a purpose.
Yeah.
That most of the time is serving not only you, but others. So follow that purpose, even if it doesn't make sense. It's not easy to do. It is not easy to do. And there will be times when you don't. And that's okay, because guess what? You learned something.
Well, and now to tie this all up in a nice bow, it's so interesting that you say that. It's not easy to do, but it's easier to do when you have someone that you trust, someone that you love, somebody that you have partnered with in order to go through that journey with you. And Chris, being there, allows you to wake up fresh, allows your daughter to be dancing in the dining room, allows the boy, and he's probably out there tackling Brixton, out there throwing the ball and having a great time with Brixton, but having the security of relationship and companionship. Do you think that would tie this all together by talking finally about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge piece of having that support system outside of, to lean on, and having those people that you can know at the end of the day, they've got your back. They're there to support you, because like I said, some of these choices are not going to be easy, and some of the work isn't going to be easy. But in my experience, it's been worth what comes with when you do the work and when you do follow through, it has been so worth it. And so, yes, having that partnership, I am just so grateful for. I mean, we've definitely, and I feel like this is important to say too, because sometimes we can see people and think like, we've heard this before, like, oh, they just look so good, they look so good together, they have this perfect
Right.
life, blah blah blah. We have our arguments, we have our times where we're like, what are you thinking, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it comes back, and so I just want to offer that too. There's bumps along the road in our relationship, there's bumps along the road with me and my kids, because that's life. Not everything will ever be smooth sailing all the time. And so again, it's just about embracing that part of the journey, embracing the bumps as well. And like you said, I'm grateful that I do have a partner that I know that I can count on to be right there along for the ride, even when he doesn't agree, even when we have our different thoughts. At the end of the day, we set those things aside and we have each other. So
You both, yeah, you have created common commitments, and there's no give up in the Groth family. I love it.
Redirecting.
That's correct. And I say ditto to that. I mean, Danny and I, 6 kids, we've come through a lot, and it might look great on the outside, but we have those heart to hearts a lot as well. And it's not easy. And you want your kids to be able to experience that, to know that, hey, relationship isn't easy. But if you come together and you have commitment, and I'm not talking just about marriage, business, how you do your business, how you communicate with your customers, there's a lot of relationships that you form commitments at different levels with. You just want to stay committed and have no give up in you. And that sounds like what Coach Wilkinson saw in that 5th grader or 4th grader when he said, hey, Alina, it's your heart, and we can work with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Commitment. Alina, oh, you know what? And I promised myself that I would do this. Go ahead and give a shout out to your realtor, because that was a part of the post as well, I think. Do you want to say her name and then say how great she is or something? Because that was a commitment, and she helped you.
Yes, absolutely. Ashley Shepard, you can find her on Facebook. She's a friend of mine. Incredible to work with. She goes above and beyond, and it just made the journey so smooth. Like when you hear people say buying a house is so stressful, really, it was so smooth. The last week or two got a little bumpy, just because you have to move and change all the things that you've had consistent for 7 years. But other than that side of it, everything she took care of and handled so beautifully. I was left with no questions. I was clear on everything that was going on the entire time, and I just think that's so wonderful to have. So her and Amy Moon was my lender. Loved her. Also great team to work with. So if you're on the market looking, they would be your ladies to look for.
Oh, and I am a proponent of home ownership. You mentioned 7 years. You just learn that consistency, but everybody can buy a home. There's no excuse. You just have to begin relationship with somebody who might know a little bit more than you. Get in there and buy your house. That helps. Don't you think that that's going to help your kids later on, because now you're a homeowner rather than something else?
Absolutely, for sure. We made our first purchase back almost 7 years ago with that house. It was our first house, and building up the equity in that helped us move into our now new home. So I'm definitely an opponent to getting yourself into a house at whatever level, even if you need to start a little smaller to build and gain and then move forward. There's ways to do it.
Just make a plan, get some inspiration, find a partner, and move forward in it. And remember, don't quit.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. And be teachable along the way. Learn something.
Yes.
Alina, it's always a pleasure for me to see you. You bring just a smile to my face, no matter if I just see you walking across the street or down into the coffee shop. Our family really does care a lot for you, Alina. Thank you for all that you have accomplished, but thank you even more for the example that you are for the young families in our community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share on a level that gives people a little bit more insight. And I just want to put it out there too in closing that if you are in a situation that was similar and you feel like you would like have any questions from anything that I talked about today, you're more than welcome to message me on Facebook. Like I said, when I swapped that, like this is everything is for me. It was also learning that I am a teacher. I'm really great at teaching. And so these are lessons that I've gotten to learn to also be able to share, hey, here's a different perspective maybe on how to look at this situation and move forward.
That is great. We need to take advantage of that with each person that we can come alongside who has experiences that are different than ours, because we all can continue to learn. Thank you very much, Alina. And we're going to let you go now. And I thank everybody for tuning in to the Talk to People podcast. What a gift it is to be able to talk with the wonderful people within our community. And we want to encourage everybody to do the same. When you come upon someone and you might have questions or ill feelings about or something, remember, talk to them, get to know them a little bit better, and you're going to have a better perspective of where they come from and how you just might be more the same than what we realize. Shawnee, I truly believe in those things that Alina has talked about today. I believe in being inspired, finding your inspiration. I believe in setting your goals and going for those goals and being teachable along the way. And I certainly believe in the companionship and the partnership of somebody that you can trust to come alongside of you, whatever that relationship looks like for you. Learn from the inside, seek, and you will find. And I believe, Shawnee, all of us together, we build community one season at a time. And that is not a cliche. I believe that to be the truth. I look forward to talking to you again next week on the Talk to People podcast. I hope that I'm talking with you, not at you. You can comment all that you would like. If you see us on the street, stop us. We'd love to talk with you. And remember to subscribe, like, ring the bell, whatever, all of those things that you need to do right there. Make sure that those happen. We'll see you next week on another edition of the Talk to People podcast. I'm Daniel Shaughnessy. Good day. Great day, everybody.